On this episode of the greatest characters in pop culture history, we look at a character whose name alone sparks images of a person who's greedy, mean, and miserly, who doesn't care about people, but just wants to accumulate wealth. Yet in the end, it's a character who also embodies the ideal of redemption, that it's never too late to become better. It's from one of the greatest ghost stories ever written, and it's been adapted countless times. We're talking about Ebenezer Scrooge. Here we go. Welcome to another episode of Greatest Characters in Pop Culture History. This is only my second episode, so I almost forgot the title. I am with my friend, writer, director, actor, comedian, and most importantly, husband and father, great family man, Roland Arucci. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Nick, thanks for having me. Thanks for plugging me with everything. Good Lord. Good Lord. I think I'm just, he's good at breathing. He's great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I had asked a bunch of my friends which characters they would like me to talk about. And you picked Ebenezer Scrooge, which I think is a great choice. So why don't we start with just why you thought Ebenezer Scrooge would be something to talk about?
I think it's a character that always seems to come back for me. Growing up in the U.S. and watching all the iterations, animated and musicals and films and TV presentations of it, it's always been something that drew me to the story of the past, the present, the future, and that kind of interesting arc. And it's such a tight story. It just always intrigued me.
It really is. It's like it was a novella by Charles Dickens, right? Really short, only like 5 chapters, which he called staves, which is like a musical term because he called it A Christmas Carol, right? Because back in his time, Christmas was making a comeback in England. Like it was known to be like this kind of traditional holiday that was celebrated out in like the pastoral farms. And of course, London and other places were becoming urbanized. So people were like, it's old fashioned. But it was making a comeback. So people were having Christmas trees, Christmas cards. And, Charles Dickens was interested in writing about what he was seeing, poverty around what was happening. And he himself, experienced poverty. And this was like 1843. And right away, it became this huge hit. And it was adapted right away. And it survived all this time. I mean, it's like you go anywhere, and I think people know who Ebenezer Scrooge is, right? They use that term to like,
oh, definitely,
when you take Scrooge, you know what people are talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Tiny Tim. I think all the characters within the story have a lot of resilience and like they have good bones. I'll say, they sort of
that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, we did. But the Scrooge character, I mean, he's at times empathetic. He's at times you hate him, and you're like, I can't deal with this guy. And then there's those moments where you see him breaking, and maybe that's testament also not just to the storytelling, but also to the characters who I've seen portray it, be they voice actors or film actors or TV actors. If it comes on, I watch it, which is probably maybe it's a sign of the times of when I was born, but it's always seems that if it comes on, I sit, I watch it, and it's always.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you which one you think is your favorite because we'll get to that about all the different versions that have been out there. But so the character, like you talked about, everybody knows the plot, right? Here's this miserly old man. He's not married, doesn't have a family. His family is his nephew Fred. Right, his daughter's his sister's son who keeps asking him to come celebrate Christmas, and he keeps saying, "No, get out of my face! I don't want to see you."
Right.
People ask him to donate to charity. He's like, "Get out!" Again, not just blowing them off, but he's like, "Aren't there charities? Why are you asking me?" So he doesn't want to give any money. Right. His clerk, Bob Cratchit, won't even use like a lump of coal to heat up the office, and then he begrudgingly gives him the day off for Christmas to spend it with his family. So he's just this mean guy.
I don't even think they had the whole off. I think it was like a half day. It's like you gotta come in later. You don't get the full day. You can come in a little later. So
and here he is like criticizing Christmas. Like that was the premise too. Like this is more of a Christmas story, right? Because it's like,
well, it probably ties in true with what you were saying earlier about a new idea of what Christmas was. And prior to that, a lot of people don't realize it, but a lot of the things that we have in American Christmas are imports for the German culture and the Scot-Irish, which were more, not as cosmopolitan as the British. So they were considered the others in those regions. So you have a lot of that came from those regions. Like the Christmas tree is Germanic, the Yule log is Germanic, all that stuff is Germanic. That festivity, that sense of festivity, is more German and say Scottish Irish than British. So it's definitely a commentary of like, hey, change. Why are you still? And maybe that's his societal change, a commentary on it. Him saying, hey, Scrooge doesn't want society to change. So,
That's
looking
a
at
great
it now
perspective,
in different point of view, maybe there's a fear of why are we changing? This was fine. I made money. My partner made money. We made money. That's what what empires do. And this was at the wane of the empire, in that sense, in the global empire, the navy and the colonies were probably still fresh in their minds. So all of this stuff is happening, and the empire is morphing. It's becoming more pluralistic. They're taking in people from colonies that they lost. So you do have I think this is also that when this was written, slavery was already abolished in the UK.
In the UK.
You're right, in the UK. So you have a lot of different kinds of peoples coming to the U.S. and bringing those festivities with them, bringing those joy, that pleasure of family, and not building an empire, not building money, which I don't know if that was intentional, but I just watched the podcast about the Civil War and the Revolutionary Wars, so maybe that's why it's fresh in my mind. But that probably drew me to that because I was thinking about this. That probably drew me to that podcast. But it is interesting when you think about the world where it was. Like you're saying, a time of reinvention or rediscovery of Christmas.
That's
I'm not religious, but I definitely could see him representing the old British, the empire building, the money. That's it, which was totally fine when Marley was alive. That makes sense, and they were probably looked on, very highly upon as these guys made money.
Yeah.
So and that is in the story too. That people, hey, he's got good credit. He makes money. If we go American mob terms, he's an earner. You don't throw away an earner. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of different the way he plays that character. So I don't know. It's an observation I just sort of clicked in my head.
Yeah. No, it's a good one. And you mentioned he's a little sympathetic, and I think we see that as the story progresses because when it starts off, he's just this grump. You're like, he hates everything. He miserly, he's just like that famous phrase, "Bah humbug," right? Humbug. It's just been so associated with the story. I'm like, what does it even mean? But it means like it's a deception. It means it's a fraud. So he's just like, that word himself. He didn't invent it, Charles Dickens, but he used it. And he's referring to Christmas. When people mention Christmas, he's like, it's a humbug. It's a fake. And then, of course, bah was like, together. Sure. It just,
No, it's great. It's great rhythm. Great rhythm with the words. Like I said, even great rhythm with, and it gives so much for actors to put. I know we're going to talk about films and the characters, TV shows, but it gives them so much room. It's just a small story. It's so
Very
much
short.
room to really develop, so many people have done it, but you always feel that moment at the end. That turn, and you feel it as it progresses. It's not sudden.
Yeah.
You feel it when he looks back and he's fighting those memories. He's fighting them, and then he's seeing how people treat him or think of him really, where it's not about the money now it's personal, and that evolution. And then by the end, where he's just broken, not necessarily for himself, not for not, and he's never for himself. Even if you look at the whole story, he doesn't live opulently. He what does he have? He has a
He's
gruel.
very cheap.
Yeah,
he doesn't spend his money, but he wants money. Like it's almost like saving it for the fact of
it's
just
just an
having
obsession
it,
that he can do it. I think it's a power thing. I think it's just a saving, and that reflects how much power is too much. How
and
much
at the
wealth
cost
is too
of
much.
what? That's the key too. You see the cost. Like he's by himself.
Yeah. When that's your only purpose, what you're still paying somebody. You're paying the ferryman in some way. And how do you pay? By you pay by filling your void with things rather than people.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that one of the films or iterations say, he was remembered as one of the wealthiest men in London, but he gave it all away. Mm-hmm. But because he had Christmas spirit, he was one of the wealthiest men.
Interesting.
So it wasn't necessarily that he had the wealth, but he was one of the wealthiest men because he gave everything away.
Yeah.
And that's a very sweet. I mean, I wish people probably today would look at it, and it probably needs a revisit.
Yeah.
just culturally, because
Yeah,
it's a
it's a
very
very
sweet story.
sentimental, very
Yeah,
sweet. You use that word as it's sentimental, sweet, and scary for its time, I
yeah,
guess. You know, I mean,
yeah,
like they've made so many cartoons out of it that some
yeah,
people treat it like a kid's story, right? I
yeah.
mean, Mickey
No, it's
Mouse,
dark.
and but it's when Marley, the first ghost, people are always like the three ghosts, but that first one is the one that introduces it all.
Yeah,
Jacob Marley, his old
yeah,
partner, who's been dead for 7 years,
yeah,
and he goes home and there's Marley as a
yeah,
ghost, but he's got these chains on
yeah,
him and these money boxes. It says in
yeah,
the story,
yeah.
like here's a guy who inspired, because
He was a mentor.
exactly
Yeah,
he was working with Fezziwig, right? His
yeah,
old boss, who was a
yeah,
very nice guy, and he
yeah,
looked at him like, he's what's he
yeah,
getting out of life? He needs
yeah.
money, right? So then when
Right.
he started working for Marley, that's when he saw like, okay, it's
The
making
potential
money
let
that's
things go.
important, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And with it, Marley says that your chain is longer than mine because he died young.
exactly. So he
And
came to
that's the
warn him.
fear. And even that's a very humane element of like somebody saying, okay, I screwed up. Don't do this. He did care for him, obviously, as a character. He had affection for him in some way, as maybe a father figure or whatever, older
Right.
brother, definitely a mentor. And to come back and say, I'm taking my moment out of my anguish. And he's anguished the whole time. He's just wailing
I
of
mean,
all the
can you
pain.
imagine eternity with
Yeah,
just these
eternity,
heavy
knowing that.
chains that
Right.
you put on yourself? Probably,
Right.
that's
Every
the
link. Every
symbolism, right?
link.
This is
Yeah.
all every link, exactly.
Yeah, that,
And
that was a
then,
big thing in the story.
yeah, but he doesn't believe it at first, right?
No.
Scrooge doesn't believe it. He
No, he
thinks
thinks
it's
upset
like
stomach.
indigestion, right?
Yeah, he's got indigestion. It's an upset stomach.
What
This
a
is what people
great line
do.
that is,
Yeah, that's
right?
it. It must be something I
You're
ate.
you're
It
a
must be
piece of
indigestion.
undigested beef, or
Yeah,
that's
it's
what
it's a
it
great bit, and I again I think it's so great because it just keeps uh, building on him. Build. It's building the story, but it's also him taking down his wall and fighting
is.
that wall from falling down. And he
Yeah,
keeps trying to put a brick up to keep it out. He keeps trying to put a brick up to keep it out. And even
yeah,
when the ghost comes, he's just putting bricks up. At first he's happy because he's remembering, and then he wants to see. Yeah, let's talk about people who care about me now. And then
yeah,
he sees no one cared about him. And then he sees the death and what he's leaving behind. And legacy is probably, and that's probably also a great thing about British culture of like, what's your legacy? You know,
that's a good point
and
too.
and I
Yeah,
think that's
if you don't have
what is
any
your legacy?
heirs or
No
family or people to
heirs, and
remember you,
people just grave robbed you. I know in our culture,
oh, what a great scene that was. Yeah.
a big thing in our culture. I don't know if no one knows, but I think we're from the same culture. But when your grave was robbed, it meant you had a bad life, that you were a bad person. That was your final judgment, was when your grave
Yeah.
was robbed. I remember like someone told me about a fan member, and they were like, well, they were really mean. The grave was robbed. I was like, and it was explained to me. You don't get it. That's your final judgment.
Yeah.
Is like, and that's your legacy.
Yeah.
That they remember that thing. You only do it as how you left it, I guess. And
And
no one
you
was,
can see that in the character, like that's very emotional for him at that.
oh no,
And
he breaks. Yeah, he
yeah,
breaks. And when the final ghost says, you have to look, doesn't say it. Just
yeah,
point,
he's
no
a
words.
silent ghost. The last one is silent,
Yeah,
just
right.
points.
And that's beautiful too in itself because it lets Scrooge's mind work. And let Scrooge say the truth. So he has to say it now. He has to accept it and say it.
Yeah.
And that's actually probably one of the biggest scenes for me is when he says, when he looks at the grave and he's scared to look at the headstone. He goes, tell me, is it me? It can't be me. But he's saying to himself, he's pushing the story.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the final acceptance. And probably in all the films, that's probably in all the films and again, the animated series, but especially the films, that's probably the part that gets me the most.
It still resonates,
Yeah,
My dad
it really
every
does.
time he sees it, he'll watch it too, whichever
Yeah.
version it is.
I watch them. I like the musical. It's not my favorite, but I've always liked the musical. But I just watch it because I think it's just how big it is, and I get a kick about him. I think my favorite smiling moment is when he wakes up and the boy is walking by and he makes him get a goose, the
Big
biggest
goose.
goose he can.
Yeah.
Hey, what a smart boy you are. What a smart boy. Look at you. You're such a smart boy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, like that change, that giddiness. It's infectious,
Yeah.
in the story. And it probably is my smiling moment.
Yeah.
If I can choose a smiling moment in the storytelling, that has always been a moment of that eruption of joy that I made it through it.
Yeah.
Things aren't inevitable. That's also a message I think that clearly is in it. And that's a message with everybody. That nothing never gives up on him because it's not inevitable he's going to be alone.
Yeah.
even his first his fiance who left him, she still got married and became happy. It wasn't that,
Yeah.
she didn't let that was inevitable. She was going to be alone now because he said no. No,
Hmm.
wait a second. I can get a better life, and this is for you.
And I think he
We all
sees
have
it
our
too. Like
paths.
I could have been with her, maybe,
Yeah,
but
right. Yeah, he
she
sees that
went
too.
away because,
It wasn't the
you
way it
know,
had to be. It
yeah.
wasn't the way it had to be. I think actually that's an amazing point. I think in his
Hmm.
character where that's probably his turning point. It didn't have to be this way. It
Yeah.
really didn't have to be this way. And with the three ghosts coming in, and there's a lot of trauma in it. And I mean, probably one of my scariest moments when the orphans are onto the
Oh,
ghost of Christmas present.
yeah. He
That,
opens his, and you see,
yeah, the starving
uh,
children,
yeah,
and that another moment that like sort of wrecks me,
yeah,
and that because not because I'm an old man, even when I was a kid, that just wrecked me, you
yeah.
know, that Christmas is trying to, you're all happy, but even
Hmm.
Christmas present is saying, there's starving kids out there.
Yeah.
What are you doing about that? You know,
Right.
so I mean, it might be a commentary the overzealousness of Christmas as well. I think it's like trying to find a good medium.
Hmm.
Don't make
Oh
it
yeah, he
fake.
was definitely
Don't do it. Don't
commentating
do
on
yeah.
society of his
Right,
time,
yeah.
and what he
Don't do
sees,
don't do it for the window dressing, which Cratchit watch. He goes by the windows and all the Christmas stores and all that stuff. That's always like
Right.
a big scene. But get past that. Make it personal. Get into the homes. Help somebody be with your family, and those are the best things. Help.
Hmm.
Give a good tip to a kid who gets you a big goose. I mean that's really what it was. I always felt that was the real meat of the turn for
Hmm.
him.
Yeah.
Not being, hey, I'll be Mr. Christmas, is that you really learn the lesson of Christmas. So maybe it's a commentary sort of on two things, on two fronts.
Yeah.
Maybe, probably subconscious, but not. I mean, no writer says I'm gonna write all this commentary in my stuff.
Yeah.
But
I mean, like I said, he knocked this out in 6 weeks, but there's a
it's
lot of
amazing.
things in there. The
Yeah,
structure
it's really
itself is
rich.
just amazing.
Yeah, it's really
Just,
rich.
you got the spirit of Christmas past, the spirit of Christmas present, and then the spirit of Christmas yet to come. So you
Yeah,
see, again, he starts off as this caricature,
yeah,
grumpy, terrible old person,
yeah,
and then you see his past. I see him when he was a kid playing with his
yeah,
sister, and he's lonely, and then you
yeah,
see him, a young man, he's in love allegedly with this
yeah,
woman, but
yeah,
he's more about money. He doesn't
yeah,
want to be this,
yeah.
and it's just so sad. And then
It's
when you see
it's
the present and you see everybody else having a good time with their family,
yeah,
despite not being as rich as he was, they don't have
right.
the money or the wealth, and yet they're celebrating and happy. Whether it's
Yeah,
Fred or especially Bob,
yeah,
his clerk, who's
yeah,
got his son Tiny Tim, who's in trouble. And you see that pang. He's
yeah,
like, oh, I didn't realize. And I'm sure Bob Cratchit talks about his son in the office.
yeah,
But seeing it with his own eyes that the spirit is kind of making him see, I think
yeah,
that's when he's like, well, can't we help him? And then the ghost is like, well, he's not going to last long,
yeah, yeah,
unless he gets the help. And then he goes
yeah,
in the future, and of course,
yeah.
poor Tiny Tim is dead. It's a
Yeah, jeez.
morbid, awful story.
It's so dark. Yeah, so dark.
Yep.
But I mean, it's bookended by dark with
Hmm.
the original end with what it could be, and
Hmm.
and not the real ending. But like in the beginning, the way the scene is painted. And again, I'm going by films. I'll be honest with you. I doubt I've ever read it. I don't think if I did in school, it
It's
was like
worth
forced on
reading
me.
because it's
Yeah,
so
it
well
probably
written.
is. Yeah,
But good point, because I think that's how people see it now, is through
yeah,
through pop culture. There's a lot
yeah.
of
It
scenes that
is
maybe
pop culture.
weren't in the original story
Right.
that have been done every single time. And then there's
Yeah.
probably some scenes in the story that were never adapted. Like the kids,
Right.
listen, in every adaptation, when
Yeah.
when the Ghost of Christmas Present opens his robe and you
Yeah.
see these emancipated
Yeah.
kids. One of them is Ignorance, the other one, I
Emaciated.
forget the other name.
Emaciated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And they're just,
Yeah.
it's just very
No, it's horrible.
symbolic.
Yeah,
And it
it's very
shocks
symbolic.
him, and it should
Yeah,
shock him,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's always the
Yeah.
one. But like I know, like in the films especially, and I'm sure in the book it is as well. But the way he paints that room, that office, it's I can picture it now how cold it is. I can picture now, the coal bin in the corner, and how it's just devoid of human touch, devoid of humanity, and maybe Cratchit was. Bob was bringing that little bit of humanity in. He kind of knew that. Maybe he was trying to save. In the story, he's trying to save Scrooge. Like he's his tether to humanity. Even when his wife says, "Oh, he's a horrible man," no, he's not. He gives me a job.
Yeah.
He's an old man. He's just sad. He's alone. Let's not go
Yeah.
there. Let's not do that. So he's that connection of humanity to him who kept him grounded. And maybe this, felt that. This is the guy who didn't give up on me. I gave up on the happy people. This guy didn't give up on the miserable guy. And what is that about? And you can see at the end, there's a I believe, visits. And I always go again to my favorite film. That's the one that pops into my head, my favorite version. The excitement and the joy when he goes to their house. And how everybody accepts him right away.
Yeah.
Again, it's probably, if you're going to cry in a movie, it's probably like that.
Right.
That moment, that sweetness.
And it's, some people might say, well, it happened in one night. Can he really change his life in one night? But the way it's structured, you could really see him kind of seeing his life and seeing the mistakes he made. And then when he sees those two kids, or, he sees Tiny Tim, and he's like, well, he can't die. And then the spirit throws his words at him. Well, it'll just decrease the surplus population.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, when they perform it, the shock on the actor's face, it's like...
No, it's great.
It's his own words thrown in his face,
And, well, again, is it one night? One night is thinking it's implausible. That's one night. But when we dream, we only dream like in 3 minutes. Yet it's eternity. You can remember a dream with all granular details. And people turn around dying. And just as evil comes, bad things can come. Good things hopefully can come. And I think that's what this represents also. That hope that somebody who sees things rather than just seeing what impacts them. Not even seeing, but just what's in their world, what's in their own cold office. When you look out and you escape the office, what do you see? And I think that's also sort of like the part of the story. He goes from cave to cave. He goes from a cold house, from a cold office to a cold house, back to a cold office. It's cave to cave. He doesn't talk to anybody, he doesn't do anything. Once he goes out in the world and sees the fields again, sees the barn, sees Fezziwig's Christmas party, talking to Beth, in those moments and seeing that it's not working, seeing his nephew's house, how warm it feels. That contrast is probably really, really overwhelming. And saying, well, I could have had warmth. I could have been out there. Instead I'm in this cold night. And yes, it's Christmas, it's meant to be cold, but it's such a cold night. It's so cold. And even when I die, they're going to steal my blanket. They're going to steal off of me.
And then when he sees that, right? Yeah, he's like, is this going to happen? Is this meant to, or things that might happen? Like, and that's where he's like, am I doomed? Am I going to be like Marley, or is there still hope? And that's when he realizes the fact that the ghosts have come to him, they're giving him a second chance. So he's like, it's like scared straight, right? It's like you see what can happen. And you're like, okay, I'm not going to go down that path.
I even think it's more than that. I think, at first he thinks it didn't happen. Like he's going to die and that's it. And he accepted it. And maybe that's part of the story too. His acceptance of who he is. And that's why you can change. And they gave him that chance because he had that moment to accept it. If he just said, please don't do it, I'll change. He didn't say that. He was just, and again, I think it's probably why the genius of, not only use that word lightly, but I think the genius of storytelling in here, of having that last character not speak and having Scrooge speak and speak out his pain, speak out his fears, and speak out his plea to himself, not to him, because it wasn't up to the ghost. They had no power. I think that's the genius of that moment, of like him just saying the inner monologue escaping. And that's really, really well done in storytelling. Like that's something you rarely see in good storytelling, good pacing. Like you said, it's a novella, but people... And some of our favorite books are novellas. We just don't realize it. But they're concise.
But this is only 5 chapters, so definitely worth a read if somebody's looking for something to read this summer.
That's a good evening or two, and that's it. That's
exactly.
it, and you're done. And you'll be impacted by it.
I think so. And then adaptations, you see how it's just right away, it just impacted pop culture of the time. Definitely. People already started doing stage versions. People started like stealing it and publishing it without his permission. So he sued a couple of publishers.
Oh, really?
And then they went bankrupt. So he had to pay like £700 or something like that.
Yeah.
And like he lost money a lot. So he started doing his own staged readings of it.
Oh,
and
wow.
That became one of the first adaptations where he himself was going on stage and touring and doing these performances, reading, and yeah, so it's really an interesting story and how it impacted his career. He did other Christmas stories after that. He was influenced by like Washington Irving and some of these other Christmas stories, but this was one of the first really impactful ghost stories and Christmas stories that came out.
And it reached theatrical, which is great. So he definitely had a theatrical bent to him, and I would imagine he was a student of theater just because of the rhythm of it and how concise it reads like a script. This thing is. It was born to be adapted. I mean, there's certain stories that aren't, This was
Yeah,
born to
each
be a
character
documentary.
has their own voice and their
Yeah,
own
they're unique.
personality.
They're fully fleshed out.
They
And
exactly.
if
Even the
and
little
it's
ones like
still a
Fred
yeah,
and
everything. No, everything. The
everything.
wife, Fred's wife is fleshed out. You know
For sure.
exactly who
Yeah.
she is right away. Right away. You know
Exactly.
who his friends are right away. And the locations are very tight and well defined. They're not flying over worlds. I mean, I think in one of the movies they show like London under them or something like that. But it's really, you can fake that, but they're in
Yeah.
a cemetery, in an office, in a barn, well, if it's, I keep saying barn, but I forget what it was. But where they have the party. So it's very confined areas and maybe an offshoot space to have a moment. Confined area, offshoot space to have a moment. And you have all these other great characters speaking about, forgiveness throughout the whole thing. Be it Fred, be it Tiny Tim, be it Bob. Everybody just coming to terms saying, you know what, it's not the right time to be angry. And again, very theatrical, very moment. That's the audience's voice coming back to him. And that's what the audience is thinking. Why are we angry here? Why is he have to be angry all the time? And that's again really, really good writing as a storyteller.
Yeah. So then we can talk about all the adaptations that there have been.
Sure.
So there was silent movies at the beginning, some of them lost,
Yep.
radio adaptations. The one that a lot of people talk about when I say my favorite, they're like, it's not the 1950 something Alastair Sim version, and it's like that black and white. That's really was
That's my
very,
favorite.
very famous. That's a lot of people's favorite. That really
That's
is the
my favorite.
iconic version.
Really?
So
Yeah.
what makes that your favorite? Because that's a lot of people's favorites. And I think
It's,
that has sparked people remember that probably more than because, like you said, they probably haven't read the original story. They probably
Right.
know it maybe from that adaptation.
Well, I think it's one because it was on constant, it was public domain when I was a kid. So, we didn't have cable. So, Channel 11, Channel 9 in New York City and Channel 5 played it all the time. I was a kid who stayed up late at night watching shows. So, I was up at sneaking my little, 13-inch black and white TV on under the blanket watching shows at 1 a.m. With the rabbit ears sticking out. So I think there's some of that nostalgia. But also I think, is it Albert Sim? I forgot the actor's name.
Alastair Sim was the star,
Alistair
right?
Sim.
He was the yeah.
His portrayal of it, even though physically he's not, the leading man type, that's in modern cinema, but the way he changed from the his droopy eyes, sort of exhausted, looking down at people, his physicality, I think changed so much, and it reminded me of older people. I'll be honest with you. It reminded me of people's faces I knew. So it wasn't something that was, somebody I didn't know. It almost was like a familiar face to me.
Yeah.
The way he portrayed it. And I think that's why. I love the musical too. I'm not going to lie. I love the musical. It was just very bright and big. It was a bigger world. And the animated series I used to watch every year when I played. There was an animated series too.
Yeah. There's a lot of versions. Like the 1970s, they did
the 70s.
Henry
The 70
Winkler.
ones.
Henry Winkler did a version.
That, I hated
American.
it. That I didn't like.
They
That I
set
didn't
it
like.
in the Depression era. Most people kind of set it in the 1800s, like where it was originally written.
Yeah.
And this one was done in like Depression, USA, I think New England. And maybe it's because Henry Winkler couldn't do a British accent. I don't know.
I didn't like that one as much.
It was Fonzie, and I remember watching it as a kid. And I'm like, why is he so mean?
Fonzie, yeah.
Why is he so mean?
I think the way they tried to push it into Americana just was a little off. He had the factory and all this and that.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, it wasn't personal. I think the beauty of the original story is that it's one guy, one business. We don't really even know what his business is. It seems like he's a banker. He's a private lender or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So you don't really know what he is. Once you give him a job, then actually the job becomes the problem. In my mind. I think that's why that version didn't work for me. And as a kid, I remember I was like, I don't believe this one. I just don't believe it. It's because it's not. He's got a factory. It's different dynamic. When you're one guy and you're moving money, and your thing is your credit. That means, that probably meant that he was some sort of personal, loan guy. Personal banker of sorts, or a guy who helped you get loans and credit. So he's a money manager and took commission off of people, which is even more of the anti-Bible thing of taking interest. So it was never really discussed exactly what they did. They're all bookkeepers, so what do they do?
And was it legit? Maybe
Right.
maybe Marley and him were kind of like
No,
you know,
well, they
stealing
came
or
up like I
something,
said.
you know?
This was
Maybe that's
well,
part of
yeah,
what the chains were all about, you know, how you
yeah,
made that money, you
human
know?
bondage. It could have been a commentary on slavery, which was still, it was still a business. Well, even at that time, it was a business because the business still existed in the U.S.
Yeah.
So it was still a business being managed by people in the UK as well and in other parts of the world. Like you had India, which was didn't really become freed of the empire until was it till Gandhi pretty much. So there was still a lot of land and places that were
Yeah.
in servitude to the empire, and that to your point, which I think is a great point, that those are chains of bondage as well.
Right.
And that might have been why that was the punishment, that because you help promote
Yeah.
and propagate chains of
Yeah,
bondage.
I always read into that the
Yeah,
money he
that's really
made was
interesting.
probably not legit since he was
Right.
so much more interested in just the money. Who
Or
cares how he got it?
not legit in today's terms. Like we wouldn't
Yeah.
feel good about that. Yeah.
Right.
Or in our
Yeah.
terms. So I think that's very interesting. The bondage aspect of it would have been, that import export, but import export of what?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
But
that's a really interesting point.
yeah. And then you had a lot of cartoons, like I said. You had the guy who played what's his name? The Jim Backus. He played Magoo, Mr. Magoo.
Oh yeah.
They
Yeah, I
did
remember
a
that.
whole version,
Yep.
you know, and then Mickey Mouse, of course, with Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah,
Which, as a
Scrooge
kid,
McDuck also.
I thought they just invented Scrooge McDuck for the
Yeah.
Christmas Carol adaptation, but apparently he's a character that's been around since the 1940s, and they
Really?
called him Scrooge. You know, but you see the iconic pictures of him
Yeah.
just diving into a pile of
Pile of money,
coins,
yeah.
gold
Yeah.
coins.
Yep.
You know, and that's always been like
I
you know
remember
really
the one. It was the same, I guess, same animation studio, the Lord of the Rings from back then, and The Hobbit. I remember that style of animation. That's always the one I
Yeah.
came home to watch, and I was always intrigued
Right.
by that style of animation. And then you have the Bill Murray one, Scrooged, which wasn't
the
my
comedy.
favorite.
So they've done comedy versions. That's
Yeah.
actually that's a good version. He played his character's called Frank Cross. So
Yeah.
not Scrooge, but it's obviously an adaptation. It's a modern
Yeah.
interpretation.
Absolutely
And
was,
it
yeah.
works as a comedy, but it still has heart. I like that version because
It has heart. Okay.
it's still, you see him kind of struggling and you see him, when he's alive, like that dance for joy. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. That's probably one of his
Yeah.
best performances, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Well,
You know,
Bill Murray.
Bill
Bill
Murray.
Murray's yeah, he was probably out of his out of his wheelhouse a little bit, and sometimes that's
Yeah.
when he's really enjoys making really act,
Yeah.
and like make a character come to life.
And he was doing those interesting, like, the Groundhog Day, those interesting
Yeah.
kind of movies.
Yeah,
at
he was
that-
doing different kind of things. He was trying not reinvent himself, but he took the drama
Yeah.
turn, and
Yeah.
then he said, "No, I can do stuff that's sort of
Yeah, it's
comedic,
funny,
but it
funny
means something."
stuff, but very
Yeah.
his style of humor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And then in the 80s, my favorite version, it was George C. Scott. It was on CBS.
I remember that. Yes,
And I love that.
that was a
you know, I heard
very
of-
heavy, dramatic version.
it was done really well and very
Yeah.
faithful to the original.
Yeah.
And I always tell people that's my favorite, and they're like, "Well, what about Alistair Sim?" And they're like, "Yeah, you can have both, But I remember watching it with my dad, and he
Yeah.
loved it, and he
Yeah.
loved the ending, and that's one of those just favorite versions. So I think
Yeah.
if people haven't seen that, I think check that out because
No,
that's
you're
really-
right. I
And George
totally
C.
forgot about
Scott
that.
is like made for that kind of character.
He
'cause
had
he's
so
very
much
gruff and
weight in that version. There was so
Yep.
much weight and presence in that version.
production
And
values were great.
the production value was great. The growl in his voice. I mean, he was still top of his game.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he just took a paycheck for that. Definitely didn't
Exactly.
take a paycheck for that.
Yeah.
I mean, he got paid, but he did a great job. He earned it.
Exactly.
So and I do remember that. I do remember that that version really, really well.
Yeah.
And yeah, the production value, the lighting. I can still picture his face and the camera angle from up, and just his body, reacting to everything. Really, really interesting. Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, and
There's
then
so
you
many
mentioned the
versions.
musical. Was that the one with Kelsey Grammer
No,
that you talked about, or the
I
more
think
recent one, Spirited?
Albert
Finney.
Yes.
Right. So they did a musical version, and they've adapted that a couple of times.
Yeah.
And then Kelsey Grammer also did
Right.
a musical version.
Yeah.
Then they had the the Muppets version with
Right.
Michael
I remember
Caine
that one, yeah.
playing the part.
Yeah. Yep.
So many versions.
Isn't that
and-
crazy that it's
yeah.
just taking a life of its own?
And they've done stage shows where it's just been like a one person
Yeah.
stage show. So Patrick
was
Stewart,
Patrick Stewart did a
that,
one-person thing, yeah.
and then he
Yeah.
did an adaptation with a full cast that was on
Right.
TV.
Right.
It's just a lot. And
Yeah.
and more recently, I mentioned Spirited, so that's a version with Will Ferrell and I think
Yes.
Ryan Reynolds. And that
Yeah,
was
they
a
did that.
musical too. You know,
Yes,
you,
that
you
was.
didn't
I
expect it
did
to
see.
be, and it just suddenly turns into a
I saw
musical. But
that
that
one.
was very funny. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
like Ryan Reynolds' energy overall. His delivery is great. I actually enjoyed that one. I enjoyed it. It was a little, it was different adaptation. Not true to the story, but
Yeah.
you don't have to be. And with this kind of
Exactly.
story, it's more, and like we said, where everybody's influences are films or the
Yeah.
cartoons or something.
And it's
So
public
it's
domain now, so you
right.
can do different
Yeah,
versions.
right. So they really, really played around with it. Yeah, I wonder if
Yeah.
there's gonna be a horror story version of this.
Oh, I'm sure there will.
Because they're
It's
doing
kind
that.
of
I mean,
open. I'm surprised they haven't
yeah,
been one yet. You know,
yeah. I'm like, that's just
it's
thinking
totally
about it. I
lends
mean, they did
itself to it.
Popeye and they did,
I know.
Snow White recently. Or
Winnie the
Alice.
Pooh and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
Winnie the Pooh and Alice in Wonderland. They did a horror story. I wonder that'd be.
But
I'd watch it though. I would
I would
watch it.
too.
Yeah,
I would
would
totally watch it.
I would not give up on that. That's really interesting though. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's some good stuff there. That's some definitely good stuff there. I forgot some. Thank you for reminding me of some of those versions.
Have you ever performed a version of it? Because I know you do theater. I know you've done
No,
films.
I
Have you-
never have. My accent is way too thick. I
you know,
I would love to
any
do
Winkler
one.
can do it.
I think we can do one. We can do one. I'll be Staten Island. You'll
I
be
did
the
one in
Bronx.
college, '92. We did
Okay.
a version, and we were one of the first. I'm sure there were versions before, but we had a woman play Scrooge,
Oh,
and
that's great.
it totally worked.
Yeah.
And then after that, suddenly you had Susan Lucci do a version where
Right.
she played Scrooge. You have Vanessa Williams do a version where she
Wow.
played Scrooge. So I don't want to say we set the trend, but,
But
just like,
somebody was
we were
obviously
first,
reading
I
Fordham
thought.
Papers.
Yeah. No, I played Fred. I played the
Fred,
nephew,
okay.
typecast at the time, and
Yeah,
then one of the
you-
ghosts. We did a
you
lot of
can't be
special
Scrooge. You smile
effects
too
with
much.
you
You
black
can't be
lighting.
Scrooge.
Yeah, you
You
can't.
can't be Scrooge. You can't be
Couldn't
Scrooge.
be.
You're the
I
happiest guy
tried.
in the world.
I was like,
You're the
I'll put
happiest guy in the world.
prosthetics. I'll make myself.
I'll
look
do
older.
everything. I'll do everything. I'll kick kittens. Come on, I'll kick kittens.
Right. But this is a character that everybody's played. Lionel Barrymore back in the day,
Yeah.
and Jim Carrey did the voice for the
Yeah.
more recent animated
Yeah, right.
version.
Yeah.
So
And like we were saying, it's so tight and well written. It's an actor's character.
Mm-hmm.
It really is an actor's character because you have so much to work with. There are guidelines, but there's so few restraints. But it is restrained at the same
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
time. So that you can do so much with what you got, and I think that's why actors gravitate towards Scrooge, because if you can land this, I don't want to say it's like perfection in the sense of Shakespeare. I'll be honest with you. It's like it's so tight and so world building that you lose yourself in that world. It's on the level. This I would say is on the level of Shakespeare, even though some people say because they're used to only the movies and the cartoons.
yeah, I would
But
say it
it's-
is. You're right.
Yeah, but it's on the level of something so well written that you're impressed and you can watch it 100 times.
Yeah.
Which is a testament to how many times we've seen the movies. That we'll always watch.
I've seen almost that, and they've done like every TV show's done an episode. Like Odd Couple did a
Oh, yeah.
version, and
Yeah, I remember
it's
that
like
one.
you
Oh my God.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sanford and Son, I think, did a
Yeah,
version.
they did one
of it.
too. Yeah, wow.
It's like-
Wow. Jeez, we
because
dated
it's
ourselves.
it's public domain and it's a story
Yeah.
everybody knows, and it
Yeah.
just really tugs at the heartstrings.
It reads well. It's tight, and I keep going to that. But most stories just don't really have a solid out. They just don't know how to get out of it. They'll get out, but they stumble out. This one really lands its out.
Yeah.
Like it lands it, and it lands it perfectly where it's supposed to be. You're not really hovering. You're not really worried about where you are with the conversation or where the story's taking you. You're in it. And you're like, okay, I'm out, and
Right.
that's it. It's not too short. It's not too long. I don't know why, but
it's
every
really
version
one
I've
of the
seen
more
has been
perfect
like that.
stories ever
Yeah.
written.
Yeah, definitely in English. Definitely an English story.
And it's been translated into a lot of languages. You mentioned our common heritage. You
Yeah.
think it's been translated into Albanian? Because I think if not, you should do it.
I should do it
and publish it.
Yeah, that would be
Look for
amazing.
me, baby.
Yeah.
Just
Do
do
my,
it.
my adaptation of Mark Twain. Yeah, that would be. I actually wrote a short story. I was trying to write a Christmas story. The church approached me about doing something
Okay.
in Westchester, and I wanted to write a story about a child and the grandfathers visiting the child. And maybe it was like in the back of my head, it was a Christmas story.
Yeah,
It was a Christmas
maybe.
carol. Because I had like grandfathers visiting, great grandfathers, everybody visiting
wow.
the child and telling them what it meant to be a
That
good
sounds so
person.
interesting.
Yeah, so it was like they didn't want to pay me. That's really what it was. I gave them a bill and they said we're not paying you. I said okay.
Their loss.
I guess
Their
somebody's got
loss.
to pay me.
So, you got to do it. Writers have to get paid. That's
Somebody's
the key.
got to get paid. I mean,
So you got to make a living.
you
This
know,
isn't free. It's like words.
You got a nice big house here, bro.
develop it.
Jesus got a nice big house here. I'm just saying, it's a house on the hill.
I
I'm
know
just
it's very
saying.
different from Scrooge wanting
Right.
money. It's
Right.
like this is legit. This is
This
a
is legit. This
business.
isn't the money. I'm like, this is a business. There's no change here.
I
I'm
know
bringing
you're not
happiness.
keeping money out of the hands of the
No,
poor.
no,
You're
no,
just
no,
doing it.
no. I want to
Yeah,
give back a little bit, not much, but a
yeah.
little bit.
There's one version I haven't seen. It's The Man Who Invented Christmas from 2017. It's more like a biopic of Charles Dickens, but
Oh,
there
really?
is like elements of his characters that he's created, like David Copperfield and
Mm.
all this other stuff. So there's Christopher Plummer apparently plays Scrooge in this version. So I'm curious to see it because I think it shows him kind of struggling with the things he
Yeah,
went through in life and how he was struggling with telling these stories.
I'd
So
like to
it
see that.
sounds
Yeah,
interesting,
yeah.
and I would like to check that out.
I think I
But
will too. Yeah,
yeah. Are there any that you mentioned the Alistair Sim version
yeah,
as your favorite?
yeah.
Any others that kind of stand to mind, or ones that you really hate that you think were
I
really
don't
a
really.
terrible adaptation?
I wasn't a big fan of Scrooge. I know you liked it. I just
I
wasn't a
like
big fan of
Scrooged,
it.
yeah.
I remember seeing it in college, and I was like, okay, I'll
Mhm.
watch it. I just didn't. I don't know why I didn't. I think maybe it was too polished for me,
Maybe.
and that's just me. You know, I
Yeah.
felt like it was just too clean.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit too big world with the characters. They
Uh-huh.
modernized it in ways I just didn't like the rhythm of it. But like anything in black and white that you can see, just see it. You know, be it the first version. I've seen a bunch of other ones, and uh, and I think the first one had the actor with the really long face and the really angular features, and that's the one that always stuck to me in my
Hmm.
mind of who Scrooge is. And
Okay.
I think everybody has that global image. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
sort of. Sims didn't also didn't have that. He had more of a rounded face.
Right.
And at first, I didn't like him because of that. So I couldn't get.
Okay.
And I used to watch all the versions. So I say, oh,
Hmm.
I used to get TV Guide and see what was playing this week, and be, oh, it's friggin' Christmas Carol. Great, I'll watch it, not knowing it was the 1951 one. You know, like
Right.
it's this one, but I want the other guy. But I get watching it anyway, and
Yeah.
that's how I
Yeah.
sort of like got introduced to it. So I mean, that's probably my biggest note to people would be just watch all of them. There's none that I really hate. You know,
Yeah. I mean, the story itself carries
right.
it through.
Yeah. Henry Winkler is probably not. That's not going to be on repeat for me.
Exactly. You got to really hunt
Yeah,
that one down.
that one
You
I'd
know?
like to. Yeah, you're not going to even get that.
But he was trying to
in-
break out of the Fonz, like trying to do
and
these
he was
other
he's a great
roles.
he's a great actor.
He's a good
and
actor. He's
yeah,
a good
a
actor.
very
I
good
like him.
actor. So
You
I
know.
think now he could probably play it better.
Yeah. Now that he's
I
older,
think
for sure.
Yeah, I think now he has more chops in that sense, or we're accepting of it more. And,
Yeah.
I make some different choices. I'd love to see him do something like that now. But at that time, I just don't think it was right. It was just, to me, that was a bit of, not from him, but that was a bit of a money grab. He
Yeah.
probably wanted to do something different. He's like, okay, we'll give you this, and we'll get a boatload of money, and this is going to pay for the extension on your house and the court. Yeah, and he's like, well,
Exactly
okay,
right.
yeah,
There
I'll
you
take
go.
it. Hey, yeah, I'll take it.
Exactly.
But that's probably the one that's probably the weakest,
Hmm.
I would say. The animated ones are always fun because it just gives a story
Yeah.
to kids. And I like to see what they include or how they approach that very dark material.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
Flintstones have done one.
Yeah.
Barbie has done one.
Yeah.
It's like
Wow.
sometimes I think it's like just rote. Like you just take these characters
You
and
got to
throw
do it
them in.
eventually.
You
Yeah.
know, have the Simpsons done one? I'm sure they have.
I'm sure
They've
they
done
have.
at least
Yeah.
references to it.
Yeah. I'm sure they have. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a story where it's like it's hard to ruin the story.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like
that's-
the story is
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah,
But
I think
like you're right. There are times when you see it and you're like, that's just a money grab. They didn't really
Yeah.
put much thought or
Yeah,
effort
there's
into it. They just like kind of
special episode. Yeah.
yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, great. Yeah, and that's usually the TV stuff. I mean, the Flintstones, I do remember that one. And yeah, it's a money grab. They probably have no other scripts. But,
It's the Flintstones.
it's still the Flintstones. Yeah, it's still interesting. Yeah, it was still interesting. So, I'm sure the Jetsons did the same thing. They probably did the same channels in the
Exactly.
background. So, yeah.
But now
So
I got to hunt down like Sanford and Son in that episode.
that
'Cause
one,
now I'm like curious.
that would have been interesting because it was just a different kind of play on where they were society, where
Exactly.
society-wise where they were. Because that was a great series. And I don't want to
Exactly.
go off on a tangent, but that was a great series showing a different part of the world that people don't really think about
Yeah.
with those kind of characters. So definitely that I'd like to probably watch again. There's some interesting ones out there, and it comes up every now and then. People remake it all the time; you just don't realize it.
For sure.
The one with Ryan Reynolds, I knew it was Scrooge influenced or Christmas Carol influenced, but I didn't really think of it as a adaptation. In all honesty,
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I didn't know what to expect when I watched it. and
Yeah,
liked
I
it,
didn't really expect much. I was like, oh, it's on. Let me put it on. And that was fun. So it's a story that can be fun, and it still brings across a lot. Which,
Right.
again, like at the time, and we didn't talk about the other characters that sad as hell with Tiny Tim and
Yeah, Tiny Tim. I guess we could wrap up with him because, is like a lot of people like now we're living a cynical age.
Yeah,
where they just like kind of like mock Tiny Tim. A lot of parodies have been done about this
Yes.
too, right?
Oh yeah,
You know,
he's the
and
most
his
parodied
catchphrase, "God bless us, everyone," right?
Yeah,
Over
everyone, right? Yeah,
but it is Tiny Tim.
Yeah.
He's such a pivotal character. I think that's one of the last things that kind of stabs him in the heart was like seeing
Yeah.
him. He's like, can't somebody help him? And the ghost is like, yeah, but he doesn't have Bob Cratchit doesn't have the money to go to
Right.
the right doctor and to give him the right medicine and to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
So if something isn't done, Tiny Tim is not going to make it till next Christmas.
Right.
You know, and then of course you see the future, and not only is he dead, Scrooge, but Tiny Tim is dead.
That hurts him more.
It's
Yeah,
like, you know,
that
so I
hurts him
think
more a
that's
little bit.
kind of. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think, if he didn't see Tiny Tim die, I think it wouldn't have had that impact of, oh my God, that's it. My time is up.
Again,
you know,
legacy.
what did I do in this life? I didn't do anything. I didn't
legacy.
help anybody.
And Tiny Tim's voice is the voice of compassion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's again the audience's voice. You know, and I think that's almost like why it repeats. No, everyone. No, not just God bless all, everyone. You have to bless.
God bless
everyone.
us, everyone.
Everyone. It's
Even
not
the ones
just,
you hate.
You can't be selective. And I think that's kind of
Even the
interesting.
ones you don't see.
Right?
Even the,
Yeah,
the
it's
folks that
everyone,
are-
no matter what.
yeah.
No, it's a very sweet story. Probably
Yeah.
based in some sort of Christian foundation, not necessarily Christmas, but in his perception of
Yeah,
what
it's very
faith is.
secular because he's not really talking religion
Right,
at
it's
all in the
secular.
story.
Right,
It's
it's
just
secular.
but it's that
But it's his
secular
faith.
celebration
It's his personal
and
faith. It's his
right.
personal faith of how we should treat people.
And that's
I
maybe
think
Charles Dickens saying
yeah.
that, right? Like
Right,
seeing
yeah.
in society how Christmas is coming back, and people
Right.
saw, and people were probably debating that at the time. It's like,
Yeah.
do we need these old fashioned,
Yeah.
leave that
or
at the
is
farm?
it? Well, also before that, it was considered an excess, and it was banned.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot. Well, the Pilgrims left British because they weren't allowed to celebrate Christmas the way they wanted to celebrate it. So there were a lot of societies that were very enthusiastic about religion, and these sort of celebrations were banned. So I think this story almost tries to find a balance for that. Like, you don't get it. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to give sacrifices, but you have to care.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the message.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the excess. It's not the window shopping. It's not the big parties, which maybe that was right in a way with Scrooge. That, hey, he just throws all his money away, but was he really helping anybody? No, he made people happy for a night, but he still didn't help anybody in that sense.
Yeah.
He took it to another level where now, no, I'm helping everybody. He's taking Tiny Tim's words as canon for his life, saying, this is my life now.
Yeah.
Now I help everyone.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who they are. And I think that's the interesting turn, which we would land it on like a really somber note, but like, wow, I think, thinking about it, it's an interesting way to think about the story, the way it lands.
Right.
Again, really well
like
written story.
when he's saying humbug, bah humbug, it's like, this is a fraud, this is a fake Christmas, who cares? But at the end, he believes in that spirit of Christmas, or just helping people in community and being together.
Yeah, he found his Christmas. He found his Christmas, and it was, again, like I said, he was considered the richest man in London or whatever, because he had friends. He made people laugh, and he gave.
That's true.
And that's actually that's wealth in this story. So that's really interesting that they, even back then, it's from the 1800s, where people were like, listen, don't just stop getting your head lost in this stuff. It's not about having the biggest party. So
Exactly.
So I think there's a bit, and maybe it's also a message of look back at your life and reevaluate where you're going.
Yeah.
And that's
and
what
it's
he was
never
made
too
to
late.
do.
It's
Right.
never too late.
He
I think
reevaluated
that's
where he's
also the
going. He's
final
still
thing.
going. You're still going. So reevaluate where you're going.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to button that up. I think.
And poor Marley's just out there with his chains.
Sad bastard.
Too
Sad
late.
Bastard. Too late.
Sorry.
Messed up, Marley.
All right.
You messed up.
Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to say?
No,
or-
I got no thoughts. I'm an old man.
Thank you so much, Roland. Really
you,
happy
sir.
to have you on.
Yeah, my pleasure, sir.
Everybody listening, thank you for tuning in. And I'm just starting out with this, so I
you're doing a
appreciate
great job,
everybody
sir.
that's sharing and liking, and leave your comments. Tell me, what you thought of it. But until next time, this is Nick, and I'm with my guest Roland. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you, bye.